Freestyle the news!
The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So it's an option we're actively looking at.
Yeah. Ring the alarm, pressure over the wire like I just dismantled a bomb. They keep escalating the fire while requiring calm, just to bring me back to the moment where they fire Saddam. Look here, the xenophobics on a comeback tour, just to crash out over a signal. What you come back for? I ain't selling you bitches nothing, and yo, fuck that store. Need a legacy, people want it if they run back more, so come and get some. Flex up, fuck around and get jumped. Tariffs on my movies, giving AI on my check stubs. Elmo back on LinkedIn while the fascists trying to cut funds. If you such a patriot, then CC Jordan Hudson. On every other interview, I'm about to have the best run. Yeah, you want the album, but Riri got a new bump. Take him to the garden with a double out of Boston. Lightning in a bottle, check the title on my roster. Woo! Oh my God, baby, I'm that guy. Fuck out of my way like it's Newark, baby, you can't fly. Pay me what you owe me, motherfucker, like I'm Hawkeye. Ignoring the course, so your number short like it's 05. I can see the L's like they motherfucking tell. Say you got so many deals, you be telling on yourself. Alcoholic prosecutors while the CEO of health look like Parks and Recreation. Bobby Newport got the belt. My God. Yeah, let me take the floor back, screaming shots fired like a Karen at some DoorDash. Lithium deposits got you dripping out with pure cash. Doomerism heavy, but I really can't afford that. Real talk, the revolution be televised while grifters switching sides so they comfortably sell advice. You lost it, cost it, body all the bosses. I'm the gorilla standing over hundreds at the mosh pit. Blah. Too soon? Fuck around, find out. Let's get it. For a second, I thought like it looked like I had like a perm or something like that, but then I was just like, oh no, my hair's just fucked up right now. Hey, thank you guys so much for watching Freestyle the News. If you like what you heard, please drop down from the sky and befriend a friendly, small like button who doesn't really have a lot of friends, but her sister is taking care of her, so she kind of has to take care of you. And then basically, as you befriend the like button, you start to realize that maybe you're not just an experiment, you're actually more than just a dog, you're a friend and your family, and that's what Ohana means. And leave a comment on your favorite bar. I gotta say, the Lilo and Stitch movie keeps looking better and better as it goes along, and I think that my biggest problem with Disney live action movies in general is it's just, okay, let's just fucking do this, whatever. But I've seen like multiple TikToks of the director like taking time to be like, hey, this is actually gonna be really, really cool, about all the care and the heart he put into it. I know the original voice of Stitch, who is also the director of the original Lilo and Stitch, is coming back to voice Stitch for this. I don't think it's gonna be the exact same feeling, but I think it's gonna be a nice translation and view into it. And while I'm mad we don't get to see an alien in drag, it's still gonna be a good time. Man, it feels like forever since we've gotten to do a Freestyle the News properly. I'm so sorry. We were really behind on Evo stuff, and it's been really, really kind of weighing down on us. I know Evo Japan should be finishing up by the time you see this. I just want to give a shout out to the team. I know they're working really, really hard on this stuff. It's not easy with all of the moving technical parts in play. I can tell you that for me, working on the soundtrack, my process is pretty simple. Start the year feeling like an imposter and a fraud and there's nothing I can do and oh my God, I've given up. And then midway through the year at the last minute, I'm like, holy shit, I'm him. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Come at me, bro. But yeah, we've been working diligently on the soundtrack. I'm really excited to show that to you guys. But also very quickly, before we jump into this breakdown, I do want to let you know that we also released a Zed Talks earlier this week, and we released a new podcast around nerdy shit, like trading card games. I'm playing the One Piece trading card game a lot, and we released a podcast called Go for Lethal, and you should check it out because it's really fun. And I pulled the alt art Luffy leader, which is a fucking $500 card, so I'm in a good place. All right, that's enough of that. Let's get into this breakdown, and let's start off with everybody's favorite monkey's paw wish that went horribly wrong during the 2016 election, Donald Trump. It's been a fairly tumultuous week for the Trump administration, with multiple judge rulings blocking key initiatives, a bunch of Republican infighting, and also a ton of negotiations when it comes to all of the things he inflicted upon himself. You fucked up, man. Now look, I do keep stressing all the time that Trump has significantly shrunk in his political capital, but that doesn't mean he hasn't been making progress in certain areas for his own personal agenda. That meeting with Mark Carney went decently well for what he wanted it to do, and he's nominated Jeanine Pirro as head DC prosecutor and a wellness influencer who's like super into the Make America. The culture wars are alive and well. But look, the major story for this weekend dropped on Friday. Who would have fucking guessed it when Trump aide and well-known bald pussy Stephen Miller stated publicly that the administration was actively actively looking at suspending habeas corpus. Adding on to that fucking wild phrase he just casually dropped that it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. Okay. Naturally, this quasi-authoritarian move freaked people the fuck out. Both who knew what habeas corpus was and many who didn't. Anything Latin and constitutional that you hear, fucking no, don't fucking take it away. It's like an antique you find in repo. Did you like that? Did you like that? I mentioned your game. I mentioned your game.
Yeah, but you still won't play with me.
Shut up. I will play the game with you. I'm really into One Piece right now. Anyway, authoritarianism. But seriously, we've spoken about habeas corpus before. And if you don't know what it is, habeas corpus is essentially the ability to challenge unlawful detainment. If you are detained by authorities and you feel that it is unjust or wrong that you are being detained, you can petition and challenge that detainment for release. It is the basic bedrock principle of due process, and without it, the president could just fucking detain everybody willy-nilly, no questions asked. Fun. Obviously, this is incredibly concerning and fucked, and it does not help that earlier that same day, ICE arrested the mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, who was protesting at a federal immigration detention center and had been doing so since the beginning of the week. This arrest went incredibly viral, and Baraka has been posting about this detention center while protesting it for a minute now, and it finally escalated to this point of full cuffs and arrest. Now, notably, you had other Democratic reps there in attendance with Baraka, like Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Rob Menendez, and LaMonica McIver. But as they were caught on footage around it, and as more news about this circulated, you had a ton of spin and backlash going on around all of this. Right-wing pundits and Trump allies almost immediately began comparing it to January 6th because fucking everything remotely uncomfortable to partisans like Alina Habba is January 6th, maybe except actually January 6th. And on the other side of it, you had a lot of terrified people ratcheting up the idea the mayor is arrested, everything is broken, society is falling. And look, let's not mince words. Friday was a clusterfuck of the likes we haven't seen in a few weeks for the Trump administration. But look, we've talked about Trump's hyperbole, the Roy Cohn playbook, the overwhelming strategy he has, and also his very real authoritarian tendencies. So how concerned should you be? Is it the 5-alarm fire that Phil was talking about? And look, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, always be concerned. Not Susan Collins concerned, okay? Like actually, oh fuck, that's not okay. Always be concerned when someone says they want to suspend or remove habeas corpus. That is fundamentally not a very normal thing for anybody to do, and anyone in a position of power who goes down that route, that is very authoritarian, right? And it carries with it a lot of weight when you make a statement like that publicly, especially when the limp dick Stephen Miller is the one floating it out and adding on judges need to do the right thing while you beef with the judiciary. But number two, while maintaining the very real concern you're hearing, and I'm not going to diminish it, okay, all right, there is some context you should add on to that concern. It has been a roller coaster in 2025 when it comes to regulations around people's private data and companies' access to that. Data privacy advocates have been sounding the alarm for months, and you've seen companies like Shopify get lawsuits thrown at them because of their intrusion into other people's private data. And now more than ever is the time to make sure your private data is not in the hands of data brokers or anybody else who could use it in bad faith. And you can do that with the sponsor of today's show, Incogni. I've been using Incogni for 2 years now, and they have been a sponsor of this show for a while. Even still, I have always paid out of my pocket for this service because I believe in it. Incogni is the set it and forget it solution to data privacy. What Incogni does is they go to every single data broker, right? Anybody who may have your data in bad faith or whatever, your biometric data, your address, all of that. They jump through the legalese, they knock down the roadblocks, they get your data taken down and put it back in your hands. And there are a lot of benefits that come from this. For example, I used to get a ton of spam messages and spam calls due to one of my emails, and that has drastically reduced since I started using Incogni. Incogni also gives you a progress report of the data it's taken down. Here's me when I started Incogni. Here's my data now. And they've been making significant improvements to the service all along, like custom removals, where you can point to any specific like people finder site or anything where you can find any of your information on, and one of their privacy agents will help you take care of it. They're also offering new unlimited plans and unlimited family plans. And if you go to incogni.com/Tabani and enter in the code Tabani, you can get 60% off Incogni today. So listen, if you value data privacy, if you want your personal information secure and you don't want a bunch of spam messages coming at you all the time, and if you like my cool news rap show and want to support it in some way, go to incogni.com/Tabani, enter in the code Tabani, and get 60% off Incogni today. All right, back to the breakdown. For starters, Stephen Miller kind of deliberately couches this idea of suspending habeas corpus outside of what he's currently talking about, which is specifically immigration and migrants. In context, he's saying that he wants to invoke suspension of habeas corpus there, which is a similar idea they tried during the first Trump administration to characterize migrants coming over as an invasion. That way they could skirt around habeas corpus and ratchet up deportations and detentions without having any due process. But the way Miller couched it specifically obviously freaked everyone out, and then the administration doubled the fuck down to pressure people further. I'm not saying he accidentally couched it incorrectly, but whatever way the public is receiving it, they are obviously playing into fears as well. But look, clarifying that by invasion, he doesn't mean American citizens who dissent, and he means migrants across the border, doesn't make this any better, all right, that he's talking about that. There's still people, and after Kilmar Abrego Garcia, we know this administration has flimsy definitions for gang member or clearly fucking photoshopped. But what about the mayor of the ICE facility? And look, I do need to be very clear when I say the administration arresting a mayor is definitely an overreach. And the spin afterwards with this bullshit comparison, and the spin afterwards with contrarian bullshit comparisons to January 6th is so fucking out of pocket. It's you can see it. Like the Amazon basics of culture war playbook. But does that specifically mean an epidemic of the Trump administration just throwing out arrest warrants and then going around and arresting mayors who disagree with them? Not really. And if you don't believe me, you can ask the Maine governor about what she thinks about that when she went up and ended up beating the Trump administration, all right, in her lawsuit to let trans athletes just be athletes. Look, let's be very clear and specific about this interaction between Ras Baraka and ICE here, all right? First off, Ras Baraka is mayor, but he's also running for governor, and he's been protesting this facility for weeks. He is sincere, absolutely sincere in his beliefs, but think about how this arrest worked. Baraka was put in cuffs even though he was invited, which was just such a fucking sneaky bullshit move, right? And he was then detained for a short period of time. ICE and the Trump administration from that gets to say, oh, he's an agitator. These left-wing bleeding heart liberals, they don't care about January 6th. They're rioters. Ooh, the hypocrisy of the Democrats. They're violent, just like the illegals. They're coming to get you. And Baraka, who was released, and certainly he was going to be released, gets to say, do you see the barbarism of this administration and how authoritarian they are? I was protesting and they don't care about American law. They're coming to get you. And he gets his own political weapon to swing at the administration's overreach and a baseline call to action for activists to join him. And again, that is a sincere argument to be made here, but this is politics, and stuff like this specific interaction has happened frequently, right? It's a strategy pioneered by people like John Lewis and other people during the civil rights movement and beyond. This has been used to punish authority incredibly effectively. But look, authority does get something from it as well if they pitch it right. However, Trump arresting random mayors has far more downside, both optically and politically, versus this specific interaction, which is definitely an overstep and really fucked up, but fulfills his frame of, oh, the Visigoths are at the gates and only I can save you. And once again, I am not saying that the mayor getting arrested was some cynical ploy or that it didn't mean anything and that there's no problem with it happening at all. Like, I feel like I have to qualify this shit every time for people who are like half not listening to the shit I say. I'm not saying that. But look, number 3, I literally talked about the Bush administration doing this exact same thing with what Stephen Miller said and the fight that went on between the courts and Bush over it. I had a whole fucking video talking literally about this. Look, George W. Bush stated that because the United States was at war, the executive branch has privilege, executive privilege, over both information and the authority to detain anybody it sees fit because of national security. They argued that the president, under his sole authority, gets to designate and detain enemy combatants. Humvee versus Rumsfeld was one of several other cases that showed just how this was done, with the Bush administration deliberately detaining people it deemed as Al-Qaeda sympathizers or terrorist adjacent or way too brown at Guantanamo Bay and other facilities. Again, remember Michelle Malkin and the fucking book she wrote called In Defense of Internment? I do. And that's not all. When the Supreme Court struck that shit down and said, fuck you, George, you have to come to us or you have to go through due process at least, Bush instead went to Congress to try to pass an act saying, no, he can bypass the courts on this and bypass habeas corpus. And then the Supreme Court was like, no, motherfucker, what the fuck? What the fuck did we just say? No, you cannot do that. And this was a tit for tat battle between Bush and the courts and then members of Congress when the fucking Congress switched sides during his second term. Now listen, most likely what Stephen Miller and fucking Trump and all these people are gonna do here is probably going to be similar to that, all right? Which still is not good, all right? Still is authoritarian, but it can be fought. We have the playbook and the examples of how exactly it was fought in the early aughts. And also, the president does not have actually the right to suspend habeas corpus. He can't fucking do that, right? Only Congress can do that. And Trump is already alienating this Congress way quicker than George Bush did. His allies in the House aren't having a great time discussing his budget proposals with everyone. And you have that specific political capital trying to figure out how the fuck they're going to present themselves during the midterms, in which this electorate is very skeptical of overreach and is trying to signal that to you. But Zaid, the Constitution is just a piece of paper. Just look at that. Why am I an Indian right now? Why? That's racist to me. But Zaid, the Constitution is just a piece of paper. Just look at the, oh my God. For the bazillionth time, the executive branch can give orders, but those orders have to be fulfilled by other agencies who have to comply with said orders. Trump v1, like I said before, was also filled with similar sycophants and a higher trifecta majority, right? Who would loyalty purge as well? Ask James Comey. They would do things like ask the military to deploy troops to the border or literally overturn the election. And the military resisted. And even with Schedule F and the purging Patel and Hegseth have done at these agencies of the top brass, outside of that top brass, the rank and file have not been entirely replaced and purged. And effectively, it's very hard to do that at a mass scale. I talked about this. Would you see the shirt? Most of those military personnel are trained to refuse orders that violate the Constitution or endanger the citizenry. And in fact, there are instances during the Bush administration who had a much peachier relationship with the military. There are instances of the military at that time resisting orders while the Bush administration tried to push them out. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that we don't have a war in Iran and Syria. It's also a reason why the Abu Ghraib report happened, which significantly harmed George W. Bush's political capital and standing. So how concerned should you be? Is it a 5-alarm fire? I would say it's a 3-alarm fire. But again, 3 alarms is still a fucking fire. The administration ratcheting up this kind of aggression is why I have been saying to not doom yourself into inaction like a lot of people did during the Iraq War, right? That's what gave the Bush admin and other authoritarian administrations around the world significant power to pressure its citizenry into compliance and cultural passivity. People are genuinely angry and horrified by this administration's actions. And look, I was reading this one article about protest movements and I forgot exactly where it was, but it spoke on the principle of these protest tactics of this one group and how they realized that one large protest walk or movement, right, is easier to pressure and break up because it's all concentrated into one area, right? But multiple protests across the city of smaller groups are harder to break up and pressure down, right? And that's how dissent in the United States has been the most effective. You don't just have one group in the 60s concentrated protesting civil rights in one place. You have a multitude of groups protesting in multiple different places, and sometimes they may meet up, sometimes it's disparate, but it gets the messaging and the momentum across. Actively shit-talking the administration and calling out their abuses versus doom spiraling makes you overwhelm them. They are facing pressure from falling approval numbers and a very scary 2026 map, bad economic conditions, and all of the blame for it. So if you were wondering what I think about all this, let me be very clear. Stephen Miller is incredibly dangerous, horrifically xenophobic, and never somebody you should ignore, especially when he makes threats like this. But he's also too much of a bitch for you to back down from him. So go put on your shit and fight the fire, right? Don't resign yourself or try to jump out of the building. Protect the people you know and fuck these clowns, all right? Let me know what you think in the comments. All right, couple of the stories before we go. Let's jump off really quickly with India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan have escalated the fighting that started after a terrorist attack in Kashmir like earlier this week. Pundits have been weighing in. There's been a ton of reaction and fear all over social media platforms about how bad this would get, especially from people who are Indian and Pakistani in dissent. I'm both. Great. But luckily, it was announced on Saturday that the US had successfully de-escalated the conflict between India and Pakistan and brought them to a ceasefire. And while there were some reports of possible violations on the Pakistani side of it and some tensions started to flare up again, ultimately the ceasefire held up. Now look, this whole conflict was unpopular from the start. Unless you're a fucking idiot who doesn't know anything and wants to take sides, please shut the fuck up forever. But one thing I do want to bring attention to very quickly about all of this is this Washington Post headline. Also you, shut the fuck up forever. Fuck you guys. This headline is the opposite of helpful or informative in any way, all right? Both Pakistan and India are reactionary aggressors who keep flashing escalatory actions, but also keep signaling, I'll back down if you do. I'll back down if you do. It's been like this for fucking decades, right? And when you start bringing in really scary headlines and ideas like this about nuclear aggression, it weaves into their zeitgeist and ratchets up their pundits there because they're also on Twitter, motherfucker. They can see you. That spirals, and it has spiraled in the past. In fact, the US was able to broker the ceasefire after it learned of very alarming information, they won't say what, about retaliatory strikes from India. They called up India and backed them down, and this is specifically an instance where I do have to give props to Marco Rubio for de-escalating this. That is not easy, and you could have seen the Trump administration play politics. I know it shouldn't be the bare minimum to not be an asshole, but that diplomacy was incredibly important. This could have been really, really, really bad for no fucking reason too. Hopefully the tension from all of this resets, although the relationship between India and Pakistan obviously has never been great. But with time, I hope the people who committed that terrorist attack in Kashmir are brought to justice, right? And the Indians and Pakistanis understand the shared feeling of how their citizens fucking don't trust their government's actions. One thing that was great to see was all of the Indian and Pakistani citizens that I would see, at least on Twitter, right, speaking about de-escalation, right, and speaking about not harming civilians. That's a little bit new for me because most of the time I've seen a lot of Hindu nationalists and Islamic nationalists going at each other on Twitter, but the fact that there was such a vocal support for, hey, whoa, 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 this is bad, don't let this spiral, is important and is a win. That being said, fuck Nikki Haley. What you said made the situation incredibly worse. But aside from Nikki Haley, let me know what you think in the comments. And that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Please check out Go for Lethal. If you're a nerd like me, we'll be doing more content there, and I'll be back next week with another Zed Talks and another Freestyle of the News. But anyway, my name is Tabani. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all soon. Let's go!